We will be continuing with Manly P. Hall's book, The Phoenix, an illustrated review of occultism and philosophy. And on this chapter, it's called The Ladder of Souls. In discussing the mystery of birth, or the entrance of the ego into the generating sphere, the Chaldeans, and after them the Egyptians and the Greeks, described the descent of the soul through the various spheres which constitute the body of the world. When they symbolized the divine man as a glorious creature whose body is covered with a multitude of stars, they did not depart greatly from the facts, for, robed thus in ninefold universal essence, man becomes in truth a universe, and, like the universe which is reproduced in his parts, he is a diversity circumscribed by a unity. Of this mystery, Julius Firmicus Maternus, the Platonic philosopher, writes, "It is requisite to know, in the first place, that the God, who is the fabricator of man, produced his form, his condition, and his whole essence in the image and similitude of the world, nature pointing out the way. For he composed the body of man, as well as of the world, from the mixture of the four elements, viz., of fire, water, air, and earth, in order that the conjunction of all these, when they were mingled in due proportion, might adorn an animal in the form of a divine imitation. And thus the demiurge exhibited man by the artifice of a divine fabrication, in such a way that in a small body he might bestow the power and essence of all the elements, nature for this purpose bringing them together, and also so that from the divine spirit which descended from a celestial intellect to the support of the moral body, he might prepare an abode for man, which though fragile, might be similar to the world. On this account, the 5 stars and also the sun and moon sustain man by a fiery and eternal agitation, as if he were a minor world, so that the animal which was made in imitation of the world might be governed by an essence similarly divine. Above the 7 planetary spheres forming the ladder of the world stretches what the Hermetics called the firmament of the fixed stars. In their esoteric instructions, the Egyptians distinguished 3 conditions or aspects of this empyrean, which together they referred to as, thrice deep darkness. Oh my god, my eye. My goodness. The highest division was the oceans of eternity, which diffused itself throughout all space and through which were scattered innumerable masses of ungerminated stars. This was the Shemayim of the Kabbalists. The heaven of fiery water, the middle division was the Milky Way, the seed ground of souls, and the last division was composed of the fixed stars, which were 1,122 in number and symbolized by the Syrian mystics as a circle of cherubim filled with eyes. These 3 departments of the Empyrean are equivalent to the 3 divisions of Ein Sof in the Kabbalah and the 3 hypostases of Atman in Oriental metaphysics. It is from this threefold firmament that the 3 divine constituents of the soul are derived. The lowest circle of the firmament formed the wall of heaven known to the Greeks as Mount Olympus, and to the Hindus as Mount Meru, When the esoteric classification of Ptolemy, the mundane sphere is divided into 7 concentric circles, which are regarded as the orbits of the planets. The Empyrean is not included, inasmuch as it is in no way a part of the inferior world, being the abode of principles and not of vehicles. Paracelsus terms it the spirit of the world, to distinguish it from the 7 planetary rings, which are the soul of the world, and the 4 elemental substances, which are the body of the world. Enclosed with the firmament as a fruit within the rind are the concentric orbits of the planets, which the philosophers referred to as the 7 governors of creation, and which together constituted the demiurgic force or power. From the substances of these spheres the soul of man is derived. Therefore, the thoughts and emotions of all creatures are rendered inconstant by the circambulations of these sky wanderers, which together constitute the 7-fold astral nature of the universe. The 7 bodies, vestments, or diversions of man's objective nature, so often referred to in occult things, are conferred upon the ego by fiery governors or planetary logoi. This is beautifully expressed by Hermes in the Divine Pymander. I have that book. I'll read it to you guys one day. For the Milky Way is the seed ground of souls, and from it they drop into the rings, and to the Milky Way they return again from the wheels of Saturn. In this commentary of the Timaeus of Plato, Proclus, in explaining the natures of the planets which are the causes of the energies of the soul, ascribes to Saturn, the highest of the 7 rings, all Gnostics' attributes, to Jupiter vital powers of which he is the common cause, to Mars all irascible motions, to the Sun everything which is sensible or demiurgic, in consequence of it being the cause of sight and visibility, to Venus the epithematic appetites. Man, these old books, man. The epithematic appetites, or those pertaining to desires, to Mercury the motions of the fantasy or of the imaginative essence itself, and to the moon, which is the lowest of the 7, the causes of mortality, birth, and generation, as being herself the visible statue of frontal nature. In the theosophical systems of moderns, this general scheme is preserved, but the correspondence between the planets and their microscopic principles in man are considerably changed. Thus Saturn is made to represent karma, manas, or the lower mind, Jupiter the atmic aura, or the auric egg, Mars, karma, or the desire body, the Sun, prana, or vitality, Venus, buddhi, manas, or the higher mind, Mercury, buddhi, or the institutional sheath, and the Moon, linga, sarira, or the vital body. Hermes describes the negative aspects of the 7 governors from which man must liberate himself to regain his lost spiritual estate. Upon the first ring sits the moon, and to it is returned the ability to increase and diminish. Upon the second ring sits Mercury, and to it are returned machinations, deceit, and craftiness. Upon the third ring sits Venus, and to it are returned the lusts and passions. Upon the fourth rings sits the sun, and to this Lord are returned ambitions. Upon the fifth ring sits Mars, and to it are returned rashness and profane boldness. Upon the sixth ring sits Jupiter, and to it are returned the sense of accumulation and riches. And upon the seventh ring sits Saturn, at the gate of chaos, and to it are returned falsehood and evil plotting. Pythagoras believed that the empire of Pluto began downward from the Milky Way because souls, falling from thence, appeared to have already receded from the gods and to have entered into an impermanent state. Macrobius, in his commentary on Scipio's dream, gives a somewhat incomplete picture of the processes of generation as conceived by the philosophers. The soul, therefore, with this first weight from the zodiac and the Milky Way into each of the subject spheres, is not only clothed with the ascension of a luminous body, but produces the particular motions which it is to exercise in the respective orbs. Thus in Saturn it energizes according to the ratiocinative. Thus in Saturn, it energizes according to the ratiocinative and intellective power. In the sphere of Jove, according to a practic power, the orb of the sun according to a sensitive and imaginative nature, but according to the motion of desire in the planet Venus, of producing and interpreting what it perceives in the orb of Mercury, and according to a planetal or vegetable nature, and a power of acting on body, when it enters into a lunar globe, and this sphere, as it is the last among the divine orders, so is the first in our terrene situation. For this body, as it is the dregs of divine natures, so it is the first animal substance. And here's the picture I will show you. The spiral of life. Herein, Robert Flood symbolizes the descent of spirit out of God and through the 22 states as signified by the 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet. I love these large books. It's easy reading on the eyes, you hear me? From the sidereal world with its 7 spheres, the generating soul next descends into the elemental complex, which was divided by the ancients into 4 parts and represented by a quartered circle. The use of the cross as the symbol of matter unquestionably gave rise to the ancient belief that the world had corners, these corners being simply the extremities of this elemental cross. In the Tibetan system, 4 demon kings guarded these angles of the world, and the wardens of matter seek to intimidate by their ferocious mien those who would escape from the sublunary state. As the world is the body or vehicle of the supreme agent, so the elements are called by the Kabbalists the Merkava, or the quadruple throne of the deity, as described in Ezekiel's vision. This throne is supported by 4 beasts, the fixed signs of the zodiac, which were employed by the Chaldeans as symbols of earth, water, fire, and air, the 4 general divisions of physical matter. In his Rosicrucian Anatomy, Robert Flood shows the entire concatenation. Flood shows the entire concatenation of worlds upon the head and torso of a human body. The 3 states of the Empyrean were assigned to the divisions of the head, the 7 planetary spheres to the thoracic cavity and its contents, and the 4 elemental parts to the abominable cavity. According to this system, which is truly Kabbalistic, the ocean of eternity, or first division of the world, fills the highest part of the skull of Archi Anpin, the great universal man. The element Earth, not the planet, corresponds to the phallus or macroprosophus. Considering the Empyrean as one plane or state, and adding to it the 7 planetary spheres, and finally the elemental sphere, likewise regarded as unity, a 9-fold division of the universe is obtained. This corresponds exactly with the most secret teaching of the Eleusinian mysteries, which divided the periods of the descent of the soul to correspond with the 9 months of the prenatal epoch, declaring that during this foetal period, man recapitulates in the elemental substances the whole drama of incarnation. The second birth, or acceptance into the adytum of the temple, was consummated after the 9-day ceremonial, during which the priests graphically portrayed the passage of the soul through the 9 states of consciousness. The ceremonial of the 8th day set forth the state of the soul while in the lunar sphere, when it hung suspended in humidity. Thus immersed, the rational principle was declared at this point to drink of the waters of Lethe, the moon's vapors of forgetfulness, so that thereafter it retained no memory of its supernatural state, but entered helplessly into the consciousness of mortality. The moon was the ancient symbol of death, because its emanations intoxicated the reason, which is the probable origin of the word lunacy. Consequently, every individual who has forgotten that he is essentially a divine creature is a lunatic, or one made mad by the moon. As the 8th month of the period of gestation is under the power of the moon, it was asserted that no child born in the 8th month could live. A child born in the 7th month, however, may be born and survive, because such a one has not passed through the moon's mist. It was presumed to possess some clear or extraordinary vision. Hence, the number 7 was regarded as fortunate, because it was less than the number 8, which represented the delirium caused by the moon's influence. Afterbirth, which is the beginning of separative existence in the generative sphere, life moves along, ascending, as it were, the rungs of a ladder, and passing through the terrestrial aspects of the sidereal forces. These aspects are what Shakespeare refers to as the 7 ages of man, and are completed by the infirmity of the Saturnian state, which is the last and most crystallized condition of the body before dispersion of its parts into the Empyrean state. These accidental ages of man, however, do not bring him liberation from terrestrial limitations, for only from the mystery schools does he receive the disciplines necessary for his release from material illusions. The Gnostics celebrated 9 lesser mysteries, through the perfection of which the rational part gained complete control over generation, becoming capable of building bodies by will, as practiced by the first race, called the Sons of Will or Yoga, who precipitated their shapes by meditation. These 9 initiations represent the development of specific states of consciousness whereby, through the perfection of virtue and integrity, the ego escapes from the karmic forces emanating from the starry guardians. For, as Hermes also notes, the great spirits, seated upon the thrones of the stars, control the world through destiny, a collective term for the 3 departments of karma. The sidereal forces hold man because of their likeness within him, and when the celestial harmony in man, being conquered of the parts and members of the human body around the world. Man, these manuscript diagrams you can just stare at for a whole long time and have no idea what you're looking at. Man, this book smells old. Love the smell of an old book, don't we? Another picture. The key plate of correspondences, in the order of the worlds with their analogies to the 3 major divisions of the human body. I don't speak that language, but I'll show you the picture. We all love pictures, don't we? Especially old manuscripts. Everybody's got to love a good manuscript. I don't know what was up with my eye earlier. Oh dear. Okay. The sidereal forces hold man because of their likeness within him, and when, through the mastery of his appetites and emotions, he subdues or transmutes the planetary qualities, the regents of the world lose dominion over him. He then escapes from their clutches to the heavenly spheres. Arabian writers on the subject of the Great Pyramid are now accused of indulging in a long flight of fancy when they declared that it contained 7 chambers, each of which was dedicated to one of the 7 planets, so that the building taken together was an accurate figure of the world. These same authors then go on to explain, interpreting Egyptian metaphysics with the keys of Islamic mysticism, that the soul of the dead and the living that the soul of the dead, in leaving the mummified body, was forced to pass through each of these 7 chambers, finally reaching liberation at the apex of the pyramid. Here the spheres of the planets have several interpretations, not heretofore generally noted. For instance, they become the races through which the egoic evolution of man takes place. They are the continents supporting these races, and which, in the Hindu system, are arranged like the points of a hexagram to surround the central dot, or first and indestructible land. Here also are the 7 senses, which are, so to speak, the facets of the soul, by which the light of Logos is reflected into the sensory state. Plato distinguished 2 aspects of the soul, one divine and the other animal. The animal soul was inseparable from the body and must remain as the anima, or animating principle. The divine soul was not so bound, but, motivated by the impulses of enlightened reason, could achieve liberation from the mortality of the flesh without the lower personality even being aware of this fact. Thus the ancients, including the Chinese records, circumstances where a pious man passing out of life meets upon one of the higher planes of the invisible worlds, his own soul which had preceded his body into a state of enlightenment. This higher or spiritual soul is the embodiment of virtues, even as the lower or animal soul is the embodiment of excess. The latter becomes the guardian of the threshold, called the dweller in the Bulwer Lyttelton Xenomi, while the former is the celestial daemon. It is destined that every individual shall wander in a relapsed state until he has mastered the 8 powers of the soul, even as the universe must endure in its present condition until the souls of the 7 planets are united in the messianic soul of the world. When the theology ceased to teach the rationale of salvation, substituting for metaphysical truth the blanket dogma of redemption through grace alone, not only the purpose of life itself, but the method of its completion was hopelessly obscured. Ain't that the truth? Men forget that the latter of the worlds was the very framework of religious philosophy, that its understanding was the beginning of metaphysical realization. When we have come to see clearly, as the ancients saw, the Spirit ascending the ladder, we shall then understand those premises which underlie what is now called divine revelation. Such documents as the Genesis of Enoch, the Apocalypse, and the Vision of Hermes are meaningless until the mind can envision the 9 royal arches built by Methuselah as the first temple. This temple, patterned after the macrocosm, was devised in order that men might worship their Creator by recapitulating their very processes by which cosmos was engendered. That's it for today's chapter.